4:29 a.m. Strait of Hormuz, western exit, 12 nautical miles from the Iranian coast. 11 Iranian naval units just moved from a holding position near the Iranian coast and began closing on a U.S. carrier escort destroyer transiting the strait's western exit. Not a patrol drift, a synchronized approach, 7 fast attack craft in a surface element and 4 IRGCN patrol boats in a separate element, closing on converging bearings from different quadrants of the compass. Time to arrive at the carrier escort's position within a 4-minute window of each other. The USS Shoup, escorting the USS Nimitz carrier strike group through the strait's western exit, had 14 minutes before the first element reached weapons range. American aircraft were already airborne over the strait. Welcome to Navy Strikeforce. Today, we're going inside the 153 minutes that followed that contact convergence. 153 minutes in which the largest coordinated Iranian fastboat approach against a carrier escort documented that year, a carrier-based aviation response that arrived with minutes rather than seconds to spare, and a decision made by the Shoup's commanding officer that resolved the immediate threat and generated a post-incident review that went all the way to the Chief of Naval Operations. This is what it looks like when Iran sends 11 boats against a carrier escort simultaneously, and why the response to that threat reveals something about American naval presence in the strait that the surface picture alone cannot explain. To understand why an 11-vessel coordinated approach against a single carrier escort is a categorically different threat than the smaller fast boat incidents that preceded it, you need to understand the weapons employment mathematics of close-in surface defense at the scale being attempted. The USS Shoup is an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer. Her close-range surface defense capability includes a single 5-inch Mark 45 main gun capable of engaging surface targets at ranges out to approximately 20 kilometers, a 25mm Mark 38 chain gun. Effective out to approximately 2 kilometers, 2.50 caliber mounts for very close engagement, and the Phalanx CIWS system optimized primarily for anti-missile engagement, but capable of engaging surface contacts in emergency mode. Against a single approaching fast attack craft, this is more than adequate. Against 3 or 4 approaching from different bearings, the single barrel systems begin to create a coverage gap problem. There is only one Mark 38, and rotating it from one threat bearing to another, while targets are closing at 40 knots, is a time-consuming process that creates windows of non-coverage. Against 11 vessels approaching from 2 coordinated elements on converging bearings, a single destroyer's organic close-range surface defense capability creates a weapons density problem that cannot be fully solved with onboard systems alone. This is precisely what Iranian doctrine for carrier escort suppression, as analyzed in classified Naval War College exercises, aims to achieve: not sinking the escort, overwhelming its ability to maintain coverage across all threat bearings simultaneously, creating gaps through which a follow-on threat, a missile, a heavier boat, an explosive-laden vessel, can approach the carrier itself. The Shoup was not the ultimate target. The Nimitz was. The 11 Iranian vessels had been in their holding position, approximately 8 nautical miles from the strait's western exit corridor, for approximately 90 minutes before initiating the approach. During those 90 minutes, they had maintained positions that were within IRGCN patrol norms for the area, close enough to observe the carrier strike group's transit progress, far enough to avoid triggering an immediate defensive response. The carrier strike group had been aware of the 11 vessels throughout the holding period. They appeared on the surface picture as an elevated but not immediately threatening cluster of Iranian naval contacts, the kind of elevated activity that the strait generates regularly. The contacts were being monitored. They were not being actively managed. At 4:29 a.m., the surface element of 7 fast attack craft accelerated from 8 knots, holding speed to 41 knots simultaneously. 30 seconds later, the 4-vessel patrol boat element, operating from a position 3.2 nautical miles further north, increased speed to 35 knots on a converging bearing. The two-element approach was designed to arrive at the Shoup's defensive perimeter from northwest and northeast simultaneously, placing the destroyer between two threat axes and forcing a weapons coverage choice between them. The strike group's tactical action officer aboard the Nimitz had the convergence contact report on his display at 4:31 a.m., 2 minutes after the approaches began. His immediate response was dual: a formation protection order to the Shoup and an aviation tasking to the carrier air wing. The formation protection order directed the Shoup to immediately increase speed and reposition to place herself between the Nimitz's projected track and the northern element of the Iranian approach, the 4-vessel patrol boat group. The 7-boat southern element, approaching from the northwest, would be addressed by a combination of the Shoup's weapon systems and the second escort destroyer in the strike group, the USS Decatur, which was ordered to reposition from her position on the carrier's port beam to the northwest to intercept the southern element's approach axis. The Decatur's repositioning time to her intercept position, approximately 9 minutes at full speed. The aviation tasking was more immediately available. 2 FA-18F Super Hornets from Carrier Air Wing 11, call signs Sabre 1 and Sabre 2, were already on a combat air patrol orbit 40 nautical miles south of the strait. They were the closest available aircraft. At maximum speed, their transit to the contact area, approximately 6 minutes. 6 minutes. The first Iranian element would reach the Shoup's weapons range in 14 minutes. The aircraft would arrive 8 minutes before the first engagement window opened. That seemed adequate. It almost was not. At 4:33 a.m., 4 minutes after the approach began, the strike group's E-2D Advanced Hawkeye Airborne Early Warning Aircraft, which had been on orbit covering the strait transit, transmitted an updated contact picture that changed the threat assessment. The 7-vessel southern element was not in a single-axis approach formation. It was in a modified wedge, 3 vessels in the lead, 2 on each flank, with the flanking pairs offset to the south relative to the lead group. The wedge geometry meant that if the Decatur moved to intercept the lead 3 vessels' axis, the flanking pairs would arrive at the Shoup's beam from bearings that the Decatur's new position would not cover. 4-vessel northern element, 7-vessel southern wedge with flanking pairs. The Shoup caught between both. The tactical action officer aboard the Nimitz had a third decision to make that he had not anticipated when the initial formation orders went out: whether to commit a third aviation asset, another section of Super Hornets, from the carrier's alert posture to cover the flanking pairs of the southern element, or to rely on the Decatur to adjust her positioning after arrival to cover both the lead and flank axes. Committing a third aviation section would take approximately 12 minutes from launch to station. The flanking pairs would arrive at engagement range before the third section could be on station. The Decatur's adaptive coverage, adjusting after arriving to address the flanking geometry, was the faster option, but required the Decatur's commanding officer to execute a dynamic repositioning under time pressure that had not been briefed before the transit began. The Decatur's commanding officer received the updated tactical picture at 4:35 a.m. and immediately transmitted back. He understood the flanking geometry and would position to address both the lead axis and the northern flanking pair simultaneously, accepting reduced effectiveness against the southern flanking pair in exchange for coverage of the more dangerous lead element. Sabre 1 and Sabre 2 arrived over the contact area at 4:37 a.m., 8 minutes after tasking, exactly as calculated. Their arrival changed the tactical picture for the Iranian vessel commanders below in a way that had been consistent across every multi-boat approach incident in the Gulf that year. Aircraft overhead, at whatever altitude, fundamentally alter the approach calculus for fast attack craft commanders who understand that armed aircraft can engage their vessels at ranges where the vessel's own weapons provide no meaningful return threat. The lead 3 vessels of the southern element reduced speed at 4:38 a.m. from 41 knots to 32 knots. The flanking pairs held speed for 90 additional seconds before reducing. The northern 4-vessel element was facing the repositioned Shoup, now between them and the Nimitz. and the presence of the two Super Hornets orbiting 1,500 feet above the contact area. They reduced speed at 4:40 a.m. At 4:44 a.m., 15 minutes after the approaches began, all 11 Iranian vessels were at reduced speed, some beginning course changes away from the carrier Escort. The last Iranian vessel to alter course was the lead vessel of the Southern Element, a larger patrol boat that continued its approach to within 3,100 meters of the Shoup before altering course north at 4:47 a.m. 3,100 meters. Within effective engagement range of the Shoup's 25mm Mark 38 chain gun, which had the contact tracked and was awaiting an engagement authorization that the commanding officer had not yet issued. He did not issue it. The patrol boat altered course at 4:47 a.m. without a warning shot, without a weapon employment, without any action beyond the physical presence of a destroyer between it and the carrier, and two Super Hornets orbiting overhead. By 4:52 a.m., all 11 vessels were on opening courses. The Nimitz continued her westbound transit and cleared the strait exit at 5:41 a.m. The Shoup and Decatur maintained their defensive positions until the carrier was 30 nautical miles west of the strait before resuming standard escort geometry. The post-incident review conducted at 5th Fleet level was the most extensive triggered by a fast boat incident in the Gulf that year, and it generated findings that reached the Chief of Naval Operations Office within 10 days. The primary finding was about the 11-vessel approach's design. The combination of a 7-vessel southern wedge and a 4-vessel northern element had been specifically configured to exploit a defender's forced choice. Commit available defensive assets to the numerically larger southern threat and accept reduced coverage of the northern element, or split assets evenly and accept reduced effectiveness against both. Neither option was tactically clean. The approach had been designed to create a dilemma, not to guarantee a penetration. The design of a dilemma is more sophisticated than the design of an attack. An attack can be defeated by superior capability. A dilemma remains unresolved even after it is survived, because the next iteration of the dilemma will be designed around how this one was resolved. The review identified that the Decatur's adaptive repositioning had been the correct tactical choice, but had depended on the Decatur's commanding officer receiving and correctly interpreting updated contact geometry under time pressure, making a sound tactical decision, and executing a positioning maneuver without briefed reference points, all in approximately 2 minutes between receiving the updated picture and arriving at her intercept position. That chain of events had worked. It was a chain that required 4 things to go right in sequence. In the post-incident discussion, several participants noted that the chain would have broken if the E-2D's updated contact picture had been delayed by 3 minutes, if the flanking geometry had not been identified until the Decatur was already committed to her initial intercept position. The E-2D had transmitted at 4:33 a.m. If it had transmitted at 4:36 a.m., the operational outcome might have been different. The final finding addressed the 3,100-meter closest point of approach by the Southern Element's lead vessel to the Shoup. The vessel had continued its approach inside the range of the Shoup's weapons systems, after all other vessels in the formation had begun reducing speed. The continued approach suggested either that the vessel's commander had not received or acted on a recall order from the formation commander, a communications or command failure within the Iranian formation, or that the vessel had been specifically tasked to probe the Shoup's engagement authorization threshold. If the latter, it had learned the answer. The Shoup did not fire at 3,100 meters. The engagement authorization threshold was, in the circumstances of this incident, higher than 3,100 meters. That data point was in Iranian files. The Chief of Naval Operations Office requested a brief on the incident within 2 weeks. The brief included a review of engagement authorization thresholds for carrier escort missions under the current rules of engagement framework, and a recommendation for revised guidance that would provide carrier escort commanding officers clearer authority to employ warning measures, warning shots, active radar illumination, verbal ultimatum communications, before an approaching vessel reached 3,000 meters. The revised guidance was in development. The Nimitz completed her transit. The 11 Iranian boats returned to their coastal facilities. No weapons were fired. No vessels were damaged. But the 11-vessel coordinated approach, the flanking dilemma geometry, and the 3,100-meter probe of the engagement threshold were all operational templates that were now tested, documented, and available for the next planning cycle. The U.S. Navy had defended a carrier escort successfully against the most complex IRGCN fast boat approach of the year. Iran had learned what defending it required. Stay sharp, stay informed. This is Navy Strikeforce. We'll see you in the next one.